I will be reading James 3, verse 13 to 17. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him shew out of a good conversation his works of meekness of wisdom. But ye have bitter envy and strife in your hearts. Glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, and devilish. For where envy and strife is, the confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, that's peaceable, gentle, and easy to entreated, full of mercy and good fruit, without party and without hypocrisy.
Let's stand and sing together. How sweet, how heavenly is the sight when those that love the Lord in one another's peace delight, and so fulfill the word. When each can feel his brother's side, and with him bear apart, when sorrow flows from eye to eye, and joy from heart to heart, when free from envy, scorn, and pride, our wishes fall above, each and his brother's failing side, and show our brother's love. When love and one delightful stream through every bosom flows, when union sweet and dear esteem in every action glows. Love is the golden chain that binds the happy souls above, and keeps an heir of heaven who finds his bosom glow with love. Please be seated.
All right, church, good morning. Everybody get your cell phones out, if you don't already have them, of course, out. And give a shout out to the world that you're at Levy Church of Christ worshiping this morning, specifically to say hello to the Levites who are on the road. You know, last week we were on the road, and we were able to tune in briefly to the streaming before we went and worshiped with the little church in West Yellowstone, Montana. Saw Danny up here beginning his lesson, as far as I got Danny before we had to turn it off. But folks are out there, and so through your device, shout out to them, Facebook, text, tweet, what else is there, Snapchat, whatever. I can't keep up with it. And give them a big shout out. Also, let the world know VBS starts today, right? Sea of Miracles. And we can shout that out too through our social media accounts and invite folks to come tonight at 6 o'clock. No, is that right? 5 o'clock. What's the right time? Huh? 5, okay. Anyway, shout it out through the world, through your phones. Let everybody know you're here this morning at Levy. VBS starts, and we miss you if you're on the road as a Levite. This morning we begin my summer series about navigating culture. Now, I preached 2 prequels prior to this. That's what prequels mean, something prior, right? And so I did that a few weeks ago, and so we're getting into the specific cultural aspects in which we as Christians must navigate and do so with the faith of Christ. And this morning we start by looking at our culture of outrage. It's evident and apparent that outrage is in fashion. If you pay attention to what's going on, turn the TV on at any point, particularly to a news channel, people are upset, outraged, offended. Social media lends itself to this kind of outrage where people will go on there and just go on a rant about something they don't like or some opinion of someone else that they don't care for and just kind of go crazy. And this is the culture of outrage that we have. And I could give you all sorts of specific examples of that. In fact, I am going to give you a personal one. But I want to read what other people have said about this through their commentary. This is from Heather Wilhelm in the Chicago Tribune. The virtual in social media is now so prevalent it has a name. We are in the midst of what people call the outrage culture. For a frightening number of people, the art of being offended by everything, or even better, loudly and publicly complaining about being offended by everything, is pursued with alarming dedication. For some, being offended is practically a credo and an all-encompassing way of life. And then we have Nancy Rommelman, who wrote this in the Los Angeles Times. This is the current pitch of outrage culture, where voicing an opinion someone says she sees as a threat qualifies you for instant annihilation, no questions asked. Why ask questions when it is more expedient to turn everything you might disagree with into an emergency? A sense of emergency is what people on all sides have developed an addiction to. Show us the next person to hate, and we are so there, because we need the next hit, and we need it right now. Being in constant state of emergency, a condition in which people notoriously make terrible decisions, is like having a fire raging inside the body, one that needs to be fed. It needs new fuel, and we seek new enemies. Meanwhile, some of us who are watching from the sidelines, trying to stay out of the way, hoping not to be next. Good luck with that, she says. Maybe the fractiousness in which we are currently living, people sectioning themselves into smaller and smaller tribes, is a side effect of the addiction. It needs an unlimited supply of people to hate, and the smaller the in-group, the larger the potential enemy pool. That this creates rancor and instability for everyone is a price addicts are willing to pay. Indeed, it may taste like victory. With those engaging in these fights, while those engaging in these fights may be a tiny but vocal minority, they are nevertheless a contagion. They value feeling over facts. They reject direct confrontation, perhaps preferring to scrape it out online or letting the media do the work for them. Those of us who can still stomach cable news, watch as opponents chew each other's faces off in prime time. Pundits and politicians who should wait for the truth to be revealed instead turn today's story into a cudgel, and when proven wrong, refuse to walk it back. And who cares anyway? There will be a new epidemic of hate shredding in the morning, in an hour, and as soon as there is, we engage, or we don't, and we're splattered with the blood regardless. You think that's accurate kind of description of the culture of outrage in which we live, in which everybody's angry, everybody's looking for someone to hate, everybody's offended by what someone says, and then voices that outrage? How do we deal with it as Christians? It really can be addictive, and it really can be easy to get drawn into if we're not careful, because we're creatures of emotions. God created us this way. And sometimes there are things that are there that just seem so outrageous that we must speak, and there are ways to do so, but that we just get caught up in it, and the next thing you know, we're feeling the outrage too. I told you I would give you an personal example, and it's a little bit different, but it does illustrate how easy it is to get sucked into outrage and find yourself involved in it, promoting it, engaging in it. It's a personal story of what happened a few years ago in Vilnius on one of our trips to the Baltic family camp. We were in Vilnius before the camp itself started. Where we were staying at our typical place is a B&B, and we have to get taxis to go to worship. And so it was Sunday morning. We had gotten our taxis. They had picked us up. They had taken us across town, and they were depositing us in the parking lot of the building in which the church met. Larger building. Church had a little small place there. And so not much parking, and what parking there was for the residential, the folks who lived in the building. Anyway, we all pull up in the cab, taxi cabs, right? And in my taxi cab was Elizabeth Thornhill. Now, the Thornhills aren't here today, but I told Jeanette and Elizabeth I'd be telling this story. And so we pull up, and Elizabeth is sitting here on the outside, and so on the driver's side in the back in the taxi. And so the taxi stops, and she proceeds to open the door to get out, and the other taxi just comes and plows into the door. So it's an accident, right? And poor little Elizabeth, I forget, maybe 13 at the time, 14 maybe, she had created this accident by opening the door, and the taxi slams into it. Well, what happens? Well, the driver of our taxi goes ballistic. He is outraged, and he starts shouting and screaming in Russian, not even Lithuanian. It's in Russian. And I'm listening. I pick up on some of that. And he's screaming, and he's shouting, and he's carrying on. And Elizabeth is crying and afraid, and Jeanette is hugging her. And Jeanette is saying to her, "Don't worry, Mr. Danny, he's a godly man. He'll take care of this." And Dr. Alan Pogue was there. She said, "He's a counselor. They're going to take care of this." And so we're standing there listening while this guy's just going crazy. He's shouting, screaming, and he's cursing. And I recognize he's cursing. And he's just doing all these things. The other taxi driver who hit the car, he's in there. He's not quite as outraged, but he's in the middle of it trying to do some things. And they're screaming and shouting. And Alan and I are trying to say things to them. And difficult as it is through the translation obstacles, but we're trying to have some kind of rational, reasonable conversation. Do you have insurance? Don't you think you need to call your company and tell them what's happened? Surely they're covered by things like this. We're thinking like Americans, and they're thinking like Lithuanians, and it's just, and they're just keeping, and then we hear the word, "You're going to have to give us some money." Right? Somehow that gets through the translation. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. Oh, yeah, and then they're doing all this, and then I start getting sucked into this outrage, and I'm saying, well, you're not going to get any money. We're going to, let's call the police, or I'll call the American Embassy. We're ratcheting it up. I'm doing my Fred Sanford. I said, don't make me come over there. I'm starting to do that. 5 across your lip, that's what you'll get. And look over there at Dr. Pogue, mild-mannered Pogue, but I think he's over there doing like this, Barney Fife thing. Hold me back, Andy. My body is a weapon. And it's just ratcheting up. Outrage. We got sucked into it. Good, godly men that we are. And then Elizabeth is saying, "I'm going to have to go to jail." But then the police came, which was something I had suggested all along, and they resisted because in reality they did want to extort some money from us. Living over there, I kind of figured that out. But finally the police came. And into all of it, shouting and screaming, and luckily one of the police could speak English, and all of this stuff, they speak peace. Back in once upon a time, police were called peacemakers. And I've seen Lithuanian police in action, and they don't always act that way. I've seen them, with my own 2 eyes, take out their club and crack somebody on the head who was outrageous. They brought peace that way that day. Thankfully, they didn't have to do that to us. But they spoke calmly, reasonably, and they just brought the whole situation down. They diffused it. Figured out a solution that everybody could live with, and then it all ended. So I think about that outrageous circumstance in that situation where us godly men, particularly me, I think I elaborated a little bit with Alan Pogue behavior. But we just got sucked into it, and outrage, and that's how it can happen before we even know it. Outrage is going on around us, and we find ourselves in the middle of it acting just like everybody else. in this culture and shouting out things and saying things, and I'm angry and I hate you and I'm offended and it's on and we're going to throw down. But that's not how God would have us respond to this culture of outrage. As a matter of fact, in that little scenario that I just presented to you that happened over in Vilnius, it was the police who was actually presenting the kingdom. They didn't know it, of course, I'm sure, but they were actually presenting the kingdom alternative to the culture of outrage. And it's really simple. It's Proverbs 15:1. It's just this little verse. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. In that storm that was brewing there in that parking lot in Vilnius, it was the police that were speaking the gentle words. They came in with a voice that was even, that was reasonable, was calm. And speaking into that outrage like that, guess what happened? We calmed down. And we stopped shouting, and we stopped being outrageous, and we listened, and we found this solution. And so, on a very simple level, on a very basic approach to the culture of outrage, if we could just follow this, even if it's something that stirs us up, even if it's something that creates some emotion in us and anger, and we want to react and we want to respond, and a gentle answer spoken into the outrage will always be beneficial, will always serve as a means to bring about some peace in the calm. And so, as Scripture presents this to us, I think this is the foundational approach to engaging a culture of outrage, is to simply speak peace into it. A gentle answer. Not an outrageous answer to an outrageous situation, not a harsh answer to an outrageous situation, because as it says here, and as I experienced there, it just makes the whirlwind stronger. It's like I'm coming at you and you're coming at me. No, a gentle answer brings about a solution to that. Think about Jesus' statement in the Sermon on the Mount about what we should do and what our reaction should be if someone slaps us on the face. Now, would you agree with me that that's pretty outrageous? Chad, if I came down there and just popped you a good one on your face, just by instinct, you're going to be like, whoa, you're going to, what do you do? It's outrageous, right? But what does Jesus say that we should do if that occurs? Speak to me, church. What does he say? We should turn the other cheek. Now, see, that is a gentle answer to a wrath-filled situation. That's what Jesus is saying. If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. He doesn't say engage and hit them back. Same principle here. Now, that's not easy to do, right? Chad's going to be, he's going to be doing Fred Sanford. But you see, this is the kingdom alternative we're talking about. What's going to bless the culture in which we live that doesn't know any better? Because out there is just the way it is. But from a kingdom perspective, we want to make a difference. We want to demonstrate the values of our Father in heaven and what He's about. And so we give a gentle answer. When someone strikes us on the cheek, we turn the other cheek, and we then speak peace into that outrage and perhaps make a difference in someone's life who's expecting some other reaction. Perhaps making a dent in the culture so that through that we can give witness to who Jesus is in our life. Remember, I told you that we would go back and visit some of the scriptures that I looked at in the two prequels, and the reading came from James chapter 3, verses 13 through 17, about the two different kinds of wisdom. If you recall, we looked at that a couple of weeks ago. We had that read to us. And you see, that is what's going on here in this culture of outrage. We want to speak into this culture of outrage, which is full of earthly wisdom. As James described it, it's evil, it's of the devil. There's not much out there that's really beneficial to us. We want to speak the wisdom that comes from above, that is peaceful, that is full of peace, that is loving, that demonstrates an alternative. We want to speak that kind of wisdom into this outrageous, out of control, earthly bound wisdom that exists in our world. That's the gentle answer that turns it away, that turns it around, that gives us an opportunity to present that alternative and to show that we are coming from another place, from the very core of our being, that we're going to not slap you back, but yet we're going to demonstrate an alternative kingdom approach to things. Now, I wanted to give you a visual about that. And I thought about how to do that, and then I remembered this little news clip. And I want you to look at it. You may have seen it back a little while ago. I don't know, but I want you to look at it and kind of notice some things in it. So we ready to roll with that? All right, let's watch this short clip. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it that well. It doesn't matter. Just watch.
Okay, picking it up here in Wilmington, North Carolina, right at the Intracoast store.
The sound was, we couldn't get it up.
This is about as nasty as it can be. We're not on TV interested. Dark, raucous night at the hotel. And this wind gusting again over 60 miles an hour. It's blowing by pieces of limbs. This is what we're seeing, a lot of shingles coming off. You see what happens when you throw it off, it just takes off like a projectile. And unfortunately, a tree has fallen on the home here in Wilmington, killing a mom and her infant. The father was transported to the hospital with injuries. So here in Wilmington, New Hanover County, this has become a deadly hurricane now with 2 fatalities, a mom and her infant. Boy, I tell you, look at the wind just whipping the palm trees.
Now, you get that? You get that, right? You got that guy out there, he's presenting the outrage. The weather guy represents the outrage. He's out there, oh man, I can't hardly stand in it. And you got 2 dudes walking in the background, hey, peace out. What's up? Right? Wind's not bothering them whatsoever. They're just out there looking, sightseeing while this dude's over there. He's all outraged about, and it certainly was a hurricane that did some damage. I'm not making light of that, but that particular clip, those guys in the background, that should be us. In our culture of outrage, walking around not giving in to the hype, not trying to make a situation worse than it is, but walking around saying, hey, it's okay in the storm. We can find some peace. We can find some calm ground here. A gentle answer turns away wrath. We can be that guy. We don't have to be the guy caught up in the middle of the storm. Now, Jesus found himself in lots of storms in his life. And he always, in those storms, in the outrage, was that voice of peace, speaking into it. And one of the greatest one of those that I can think of as Scripture details it to us is when he was arrested in the garden. You remember that? When he was arrested in Gethsemane, outrage broke out. You had the temple guards who were coming to arrest Jesus, right? And they came in full armor to arrest Jesus. They were ready to throw down if need be. And guess what? Need be, because Peter and the other disciples, being awakened from their slumber, seeing what was occurring in the garden, got up to meet the temple guards also with their weapons. And we know what happened next. The swords were drawn and it was on. It was an outrageous battle. I don't know if we thought much about that particular circumstance and that situation, but it was an outrageous moment where swords were drawn, an ear was cut off, right, that Jesus later healed, but blood was shed. And so you've got it going on in the garden. You've got swords, you got going on, you got blood, you got folks screaming, hollering, sweating, outrage. And into that particular outrage, Jesus said in Matthew 26:52, "Put your sword back into its place. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword." This is an interesting statement on many levels, not just because Jesus spoke it while folks around him were trying to kill each other literally. It was a statement saying the kingdom's approach to this is to put away your sword. Because if you're going to engage in the outrage, then the outrage itself is going to consume you. Is that not what he's saying? In a metaphorically sort of way. If you are going to fully engage in the outrage with equally outrageous or even greater behavior, then that outrageous culture, circumstance, situation is going to come back and bite you, and you then will be consumed by it. So Jesus' response in the garden to this outrage was to speak this gentle answer: put away your swords. This is not how we act. Now, he further details that in John 18:36. Next slide, please. John's account of this by saying, this is not how we act. He said, my kingdom's not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest, but my kingdom is from another place. He's saying, this is not how my servants react to outrage. We put our swords away. Now let's think about this in terms of the culture of outrage today, and the message that is being said to us by Jesus is the same. Put your swords away. Don't take out that pen or that iPad or whatever, the pad, and start swinging your swords. Put them away, because this is not how the kingdom of God responds to outrage. Gentle answers turns away wrath. And in every circumstance, in every outrageous moment that Jesus found himself in, this is what he did. Remember, they brought a woman and caught in the very act of adultery, and folks were screaming, "Well, stone her." Almost fell. That would have been outrageous, wouldn't it? But we're going to stone her. We're going to, Jesus just very calmly speaks into that. He who's without sin, let him cast the first stone. And Scripture says they all just kind of diffused the whole situation. They all went, "Oh, you really? You had to say something like that?" Threw their stones down and just walked away. Boom, diffused. So you see, this is what our call is. When outrage is around us, we don't engage it with equal footing. We give a gentle answer. We turn the other cheek. We put our swords away, because we're not accomplishing anything except, as the proverb writer said, stirring it up with our swords. We're ratcheting up the outrage. We may be right. And see, that's something that we have to think about too, because I've heard that and I've thought that I'm right. I'm right. You're wrong. This situation is so outrageous. I'm right. And I want to, boom, like back in Vilnius. Not going to work either. There'll be, perhaps, if we give this kind of kingdom witness an opportunity to speak about what's right, once everybody's no longer outrageous. But at the time, it's just put the swords away. Jesus was in the middle, remember, of a storm on the sea, and everybody was afraid, and he just said, "Peace, be still." Jesus can speak that into our lives. If there is a storm brewing in our life, if there are outrageous things that are encircling us and we feel like we're out of control and sucked into that kind of vortex, let's listen to Jesus. Peace, be still. If in relationships we are having turmoil and things are all up in the air and outrage breaks out, and we're taking out our swords to each other, and you say, "I remember when you did this," and "I remember when you said this," and put your swords away. You're not accomplishing anything except stirring up anger. Put them away. Let Jesus speak peace into that circumstance. If there's someone that's wronged you, and maybe it's been outrageous, and you're hurt, and you want to be outrageous back, it's not going to accomplish anything from the kingdom perspective. Put your swords away. Speak peace into that situation. Let Jesus speak peace into your hurt, into your life, into your outrage, into your storms, and into your trouble. And then become that instrument of peace that's going to give that gentle answer to the outrage in our culture that flows around you. The church is a place of refuge. The Bible presents it that way, of refuge from all of this. A place where we can come and escape the culture of outrage and be encouraged through the Word and through each other. And so take advantage of that. It's one reason why church is significant. It's one reason why God designed it like this. Take advantage of it. While we're here right now, and if there are needs that are in your life, our shepherds will be here. Let us know. That's the only way we can pray and help. But most of all, let Jesus speak peace into it, and then let us become that person who will give that gentle answer to our culture of outrage. If you need anything, please come. Anything whatsoever. Christ is waiting. Baptism, if you're interested in that, we'd be glad to talk to you about it. If you're ready for that, we'd be glad to help you. Just come. Take advantage of the refuge that we have from the culture of outrage, and let Jesus speak peace into our lives while we stand and while we sing.
Let the beauty of Jesus be seen.